Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on when and where you're listening. Appreciate you guys joining us, guys and gals, joining us tonight. It's not our usual crew, but it's still a great crew. We've got our man Nate Markham back making his return, and then hashtag more than just a producer, Jim, our guy that's usually in the background, is joining us on the screen tonight. Normally we would have Jorge with us, Kyle with us. They'll be back soon, but for now, you've got us three. We're going to get into our early top 12 redraft rankings. If you're watching us on YouTube, you want to support our content, the best thing you can do, like this video, subscribe to the Fantasy and Frames YouTube channel, and make sure to hit the little bell that's going to pop up. Make that bell go ding so that you can be notified anytime we go live, anytime a new video drops, anything like that. But for now, we're gonna talk some top 12 quarterback rankings. So let's get it popping. All right, Nate. It's been a while. You've had some changes in your life. Got a new Twitter, handle on the screen there. What's been going on with you, man? How you doing?
Yeah, doing good. The hack was, it's rough going, man. I will say, if there's one benefit, the amount of bots and garbage information that's been on my thread or whatever is gone. So it's pretty much isolated to the few hundred people that are on there now. But yeah, obviously I miss a lot of people, and if anybody's listening has failed to see that the other Nate Markham, the hacker, which by the way, funny story, reached out actually through DM. Very very kind of a scammer hacker to say hello and offer that I could get my account back for $150. I declined, but it was it was a nice little back and forth. Seems like a good guy and a good Nate Markham scammer. So
good businessman. Good
businessman.
Kind of shitty business plan, but at least he sounds like he's a stand-up businessman.
Yeah.
Jim, you hadn't been voting for anybody on any podcast or anything. You hadn't been clicking any of those links, right?
Honestly, and this is probably not great to say to start a show, but I've been pretty not on Twitter the last couple of months. So once the Pats lost, I didn't have much of a reason to go on there for a couple weeks.
Yeah. I know what mourning a Super Bowl loss feels like because of your Patriots, actually, twice, not once, but twice. So I can sympathize with those painful feelings.
I appreciate sympathy because I don't get it from a lot of people being a Pats fan.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Me either. Don't feel bad. Yeah.
Yep. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I got a Pats fan and a Chiefs fan with me. I think those are probably the two fan bases that everybody is more than happy to tell to fuck off for the most part. So, I'm sure you guys probably don't get sympathy too often. So I already talked about we're going to get into the fantasy and frames consensus top 12 running back rankings tonight. We might go a little bit deeper than 12 depending on how we do with time, but we're at least going to cover the top 12 for the most part. But before we do that, we have some very important news to talk about. So I can't talk about news without doing this. We've got Colby in the building as well. I don't think he really knows anything about any fan bases hating his team because nobody really gives a shit about the Texans. But nonetheless, Davis Mills, he might. I don't know if he made the cut for the top 12 rankings tonight, Brandon. If we would have extended it to like top 15, top 20, he might have been in the discussion. But with us limiting it to like the top 12, Davis Mills probably going to miss the cut, unfortunately. But very good sleeper call. So we have a whopping one news segment to discuss since our last show last week, whenever we reacted to the free agency news, which if you haven't checked that out yet, go back to last week's live stream. We talked about all of the free agency news and the redraft implications of that. So make sure you go back and check that out. But big news. The Falcons said we need more than one B Robinson on the roster. We want another B Robinson. We want to make fantasy managers' life hell this year to try to figure out which B Robinson's the right one to draft, which one's the right one to trade for. And so they brought over Brian Robinson Jr. He's no longer a 49er. Now he has taken over the backup role that was once filled by Tyler Algier. So, Nate, whenever you're in drafts, does the Brian Robinson news move the needle for you at all whenever it comes to Bijan Robinson? All right, did you change your running back rankings, move him up, down a spot, anything like that? What's this news do for you?
It really didn't do anything. Honestly, I think Tyler Algier was more of a concern to me than Brian Robinson. It's actually maybe a step in the right direction. Maybe I don't have to worry necessarily about so many scavenger roles by Algier anymore, but maybe I'm on an island. Maybe that's the case. Maybe there are plenty of Brian Robinson fans that feel otherwise, and I don't believe that's the case, though.
No, I'm sure Brian Robinson probably has some lovely family that are rooting for him and might be moving the needle, but I think even them would probably still take Bijan Robinson where he's going. Jim, who's your 101 right now? The Lions, they've got their quote unquote new David Montgomery with Isaiah Pacheco. The Falcons looks like they've got their new Tyler Algier and Brian Robinson Jr. You got one of the running backs at the top of the draft board. Is it one of the top receivers? Who's your 101 right now?
I think it's even more definitively Robinson right now, and I'm pretty anti running back early, but I think he might have solidified his job, and if he just does what he did again last year, he's got the same opportunity. I think I might have said Puka until yesterday.
You just stop biting people.
So yeah, I mean, a dude who kept his nose clean, a guy who got opportunities last year. The team, I mean, even if Brian Robinson is as good as Algier was, and I don't think that he will. I agree with Nate. I don't think that he will be. I would still take Bijan there. So I think it just kind of moves him up a teeny bit and kind of solidifies the hold he may have already had on the position.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think Bijan already was the 101, still should be the 101, will forever be the 101, at least in my heart. I love the call. I think that, I think it's probably better case scenario than if the Falcons would have invested in like the second or third best running back in the draft. And I think it's less likely they do something like that now that they have Brian Robinson Jr. there. And so I think hopefully it just makes us feel a little bit better about, at least makes the folks that are drafting right now feel a little bit better about taking Bijan at the 101. But I agree. I get the argument between Bijan and Gibbs, but I would go Bijan as well. But we're not here to talk running backs tonight. We're here to talk quarterbacks. And so we're going to just jump right into it. And we're going to start at the top. And it's pretty easy at the top. So for those of you that are joining us, but maybe are a little unfamiliar with where you can find our rankings, where you can find our content, I want to let you know that the rankings we're going to be discussing tonight, they can be found over at fantasyandframes.com. If you take a look here out on the screen, if you're on YouTube with us, just a quick snapshot of where our redraft rankings can be found. And so in due time, Nate's will be added as well. He has posted them on Fantasy Pros. They will be added to the website here in the very near future. So you'll be able to find all of us that provide draft rankings for the Fantasy and Frame site. So make sure to head over there if you want to see all of the quarterback rankings, but just give you a quick snapshot of where those are at there. So we're going to start at the top. As you guys can see, to nobody's surprise, Josh Allen is the QB1 across the board for all of us. And so there's not really a lot to talk about with Josh Allen other than we know he's going to be the first quarterback off the board, but where should that happen at? So Nate, if you're in a one quarterback draft, and you're trying to make the decision of when should Josh Allen come off the board, what point in the draft is that for you?
Man, when it's a personal approach, myself, I'm waiting. I've never been a super early. Like right now, Underdog has him over the last month worth of data. He's at the pick 28, so third round, fourth pick of the third. I very rarely jump into the third, and what I've seen from that same underdog's data is that next big clump of QBs that I think that the majority of us will try to make sure we leave the draft with, or we wait until the very end, is right around round 5, 6. If I really, really want Josh Allen, if there was a discernible gap, as I think there may be the largest gap in 1 to 2 that we've seen in a few years, I think you're going to have to take him in the third. I think that's pretty much about where he's going now is where you're going to have to strike, because someone else is going to want to get that distinct advantage. And like you said, you're talking about one quarterback league. So obviously that's if you don't take one of the top, what do you think, 4 or 5? I think everybody else is in the same mentality that it's might as well wait till the very end. And that can skew overall quarterback ADP if you look as a clump. But I think where he's going right now is about where probably the earliest I would take. I don't know what you guys are either one of you two an active, by God, say second round QB in a 1 QB league drafter?
Jim, I'll let you take that. I got so shout out to 4 for 4. I got the most recent underdog ADP pulled up here in draft board format, just so we can kind of see where he's going. Jim, do you have any issue with where he's at right now? Do you like any of these guys like AJ Brown, Ted McMillan, T Higgins that are going behind him? What's your thoughts on Josh Allen's draft spot right now, and just kind of the thought process of being the guy to take the first quarterback off the board?
So I know these are underdog rankings, but we're talking about one QB redraft leagues, right?
Right.
Not a best ball.
Right,
I'm
exactly.
I'm waiting on a QB. I hope that's his ADP and a quarterback gets taken there. And I can take. Hard for me to see the screen. I'm not sure what I need to do to fix that, but I'll tell you, I'll take like any of those players that you just mentioned. I'd probably I'd rather have like Bowers or McBride. Any top skill position players right there, especially if I can double up at a position and get stronger. I'd rather wait on a QB. And the answer, I don't care where he's going in this draft, but the reason for that is Matt Stafford last year. Last year, you could get Matt Stafford off of free agent in a lot of drafts. Why are you going to pay up for Josh Allen when you could have gotten the NFL League MVP at the end of every single draft, quite often after other players have taken their backup quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not paying that price for any QB. I don't think the price difference is that much, or the point difference is that much. The price difference obviously is for what you're getting in return when you can get stronger at a position where it's harder to find players that put up those types of points.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys. I have the same quarterback philosophy in 1 quarterback leagues. And even though he's in the 3rd round right now in underdog best ball drafts, honestly, I think in most of your just like standard redraft leagues, he's probably going to be like a mid to late 2nd round pick, if I had to guess. I feel like that first quarterback usually comes off the board, in your more casual redraft leagues than it will in these best ball leagues. I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate just of why somebody might consider taking Josh Allen off the board. Whenever you look at it, if you're going to take a quarterback that early, you want to make sure you're getting your return on investment, right? Like you don't want to take Lamar Jackson where he was going last year and he ends up as like the quarterback 17 or whatever it was. And Josh Allen, the guy's been the QB1 or QB2 for 6 straight seasons. 6 years in a row, his floor has been the QB2. He's had at least 500 rushing yards in 5 straight years, double-digit rushing touchdowns in 3 straight years. He has had under 4,000 passing yards and under 30 touchdowns for the last 3 years, but hopefully the DJ Moore addition that Aiden so gracefully brought up here will help with that. Hopefully help get some of those passing numbers up. But the fantasy finishes have still been there despite the dip in passing production because of how big he's been from a rushing standpoint. But so I think that definitely plays into it. It's just with Josh Allen over the last 6 years, you know what you're going to get. Like if you are investing in him that early, he has delivered on that ADP for 6 years in a row now. And so I've always been a late round quarterback guy, always. But I'd be lying if I said now with the addition of DJ Moore, if he's there in the mid third round or something like that in one of my drafts, I'd be lying if I said I might not be tempted to pull the trigger on him, and in just like a league or two, whenever you want to spread things out a little bit. Because I do think
that's the point. That's why I asked that question before you said it, because if you're only playing in one league, don't waste that pick. But if you're playing in more than one, you want to spread it out. Absolutely, especially if it's underdog in a tournament, and you want parity and a chance to get there. You could potentially go. Like, what could you have done last year, right? Like CMC, Trey McBride, Josh Allen, and you've got the top player at each position. That's awesome. That's great.
That's a good point.
I'm glad you made that point, because I think that is the point. If you're only in one, I think you should go late round QB. But if you're playing in a bunch of leagues, spread it out and grab them there, because you could build a super team depending on how you construct your roster.
Yeah, I always look at these, and I'm looking at that same board that you had up earlier for 4-4. When you look at a draft board like that, and you try to envision if you wait in that if-then scenario, if you get into the, let's say, that 6th round, where some of the pool of players that maybe each one of us has a different, number one, next best option. If it's Drake May, if it's Caleb Williams, if it's Jaden Daniels, etc. I look at that and I go, I would rather personally have Caleb Williams and insert pick right around there. Let's use the same position. Let's use wide receiver. And I would rather have, Ted McMillan and Caleb Williams over Josh Allen and input same position again. And you're looking at the players like Alec Pierce, Jordan Tyson, Marvin Harrison, Mekhi Lemon, et cetera. It just, granted, the production, the disparity in point scoring between Josh Allen and Caleb Williams might still be a greater gap than what it would be between the wide receivers. We don't know that obviously right now, but considering the state of the position of quarterback, I mean, if you look at it, that's Josh Allen's lowest fantasy output over last year was since 2020. And yet he was still the QB1. And I think that we're seeing a dip in, passing attempts is consistently went down each year since 2020. Passing yards per attempt, passing completion, every number, the completion gets higher, but that's because they're short to intermediate passes. The too high safety and the shell coverages is limiting, and I think that inflates the rushing upside quarterbacks. Not that it hasn't already. If you look, I mean, the three of the top 12 last year had under 300 yards rushing. If you go back to 2022, there were seven in the top 12 had under 300 yards because there was more passing to go around. So now I think that we're seeing, if you can get that rushing upside in that quarterback, which we know has been the cheat code forever, it's probably even more paramount now than it has been over the past few years, just because the 5,000 yard passers are really, really starting to diminish as a whole. So, yeah, I think we're all in the same agreement, though. Waiting on quarterback is most likely our strategy. I definitely agree with what you guys said. If you want to diversify, put a couple more eggs in your basket, having one league with a Josh Allen at quarterback is always fun. Every week it is really nice to see Josh Allen, knowing that you don't have to worry about, am I going to start this quarterback, or if you happen to roster two of them, which is crazy, we know, but that's for a different show when we talk about draft strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So, sorry, back to you, Drew.
And Aiden is right there with us. Even the Bills fan, the Josh Allen fan, will not draft Josh Allen because the strategy that just continues to pay off year after year is just to wait things out and take a later quarterback. And so, but Josh Allen has definitely separated himself from the pack. He's QB1 for us. He's QB1 off the board, and you're gonna hear us reference the underdog best ball ADP a lot throughout the year. For the viewers that might not be as familiar, I want to make sure that we at least mention that best ball does not equal redraft. They are not on the same level playing field. But the reality is, this time of the year, there really isn't a consistent, accurate redraft ADP we can go off of. Like there's not like the sleeper. If you go into Sleeper right now and look at their ADP in the mock drafts, it is a fucking mess because there's just not a lot of activity going on right now. But there is a lot of drafts going on Underdog and other resources. in the best ball world. And so the best ball ADP is really the most accurate thing we have to go off of for redraft purposes right now. So I wanted to throw that out there. Whenever we get closer to August, we'll have normal redraft ADP to work off of. Right now, we're sickos. We want to talk about redraft in March. And so whenever you want to talk about redraft in March, you got to work with what you got. And that's what we got right now. So once we get past Josh Allen in our redraft rankings, there's a pretty clear next tier of guys. Really 5 quarterbacks that we have pretty much across the board in our top 6. You've got Lamar Jackson, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, and Jalen Hurts. And so if we look at that same ADP, it tends to kind of line up with that. So you've got Josh Allen going off the board in the 3rd round, and then in the 5th round, Lamar Jackson comes off the board, the 2nd pick in the 5th round, and then down in the 6th round, a real quarterback run starts to happen with Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, Caleb Williams, Jalen Hurts, Drake May. Now, there was a quarterback named in there that wasn't in the tier that I just brought up that we'll talk about in a little bit, but a lot of these guys we're going to talk about now we're into the 5th round guys, we're into the 6th round guys, and so you can see already the difference in ADP just from Josh Allen up here in the 3rd until the next set of quarterbacks go off there in the 5th and 6th rounds. And so those are the guys we're looking at now. And we're going to start with our consensus QB2 in Lamar Jackson. And I know that I have Lamar at QB2, and I know Jorge has Lamar at QB2, but I believe Aiden has him at QB3, and Nate, I believe, did you have him at QB3 as well?
Yeah.
So we've got a little bit of a mix there, and so I'll start out just since I, at least on the screen, Jim, I don't know where you stand on Lamar versus your boy Drake May, but at least for those of us that do our rankings on the site, it seems like I'm the high guy here on the screen. So I'll talk a little bit about why I have him up at QB2, and I do understand the concerns, the injury risks, that it can scare people away. He's played 13 games or less in 3 of the last 5 years. Me personally, whenever I'm developing rankings or I'm making decisions in drafts, I don't really weigh that too heavily. I just kind of try to operate under the assumption that all these guys are going to play 16, 17 games. That might be bad process, but it is my process. And so that process led Lamar being my QB2. And that's because in the 4 years that he has played at least 15 games, he's been a top 5 quarterback 3 of the 4 years, and he's been the overall QB1 2 of the 4 years. And I think he's still arguably the best rushing quarterback in the NFL, but I do think it's fair to also be concerned about the fact that he was around 5 rushing attempts per game last year compared to the 8 to 9 rushing attempts per game that he had the previous 2 seasons before last year. I do think a lot of that can be explained away from, just the fact that he was beat up last season throughout the year, even in the games that he did play. I don't think he was necessarily his full normal Lamar self. And so I expect that to come back up to the normal ranges. And I still think that he is, one of, if not the biggest threat to run the ball at the quarterback position. And I still think he continues to be an underrated passer as well. There were the quarterbacks that had at least 150 pass attempts last year. He was 3rd in completion percentage over expectation. He was 12th in adjusted completion percentage as well. But like I said, if you're concerned about the dip in rushing attempts from last year, if you're concerned about the possibility for injury, I get it. I still have full faith in Lamar as both a passer and a rusher. But stuff like that is why I said that I think Josh Allen isn't a tier by himself. He should be the, undisputed QB1. And I think it's really difficult to make an argument elsewhere because, even just down at my QB2 now, I've already brought up a couple of concerns. And so that's where I'm at as far as my QB2. Nate, where are you at on Lamar this year?
Yeah, I share the same sentiment. Obviously, we're not talking about me having him at QB 13. It's
right.
It's QB 3, and I could make a case that I could drop him to, QB 4 or 5. But the likelihood that with a full healthy season that Lamar's outside of the top 5 conversation is a safe pick there for me at 3. The pedestrian, if you will, 350 yards rushing last year, which was crazy. While that seems to be like a concern or focus, I think my biggest concern is the loss of Tyler Linderbaum. You have that interior offensive lineman that really you lose one piece to there. And we saw that Lamar last year is second most sacks of his career. When he's been hit often, we've seen his fantasy production dwindle. A lot of that's because when he's hit often, it's a precursor to the injury. And yet when he's had good protection, we've seen the passing production, which is just elevated. You know, it's been that really good safe floor for him that he just continues to build upon with the rushing upside. That being said, I'm not as concerned. The one thing I was going to ask you guys is, what do we correlate the lack of rushing besides just injury? Is Derrick Henry's presence, is that something that has taken away some of the rushing need, is when you have a force? And would another year of work on Derrick Henry, will that limit his potential volume and allow Lamar to rush for maybe more? You know, it's kind of the chicken or the egg. Is Derrick Henry getting older going to help Lamar run more, or are they both getting older and the overall rushing upside for the team is going to take a hit? I feel like there's more cons than there's been pros, but it's Lamar Jackson reasoning still holds up, and it still holds up enough for me to keep him as my 3.
Jim, I don't know. What do you think in terms of the relationship between Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson? Do you think that has an effect on Lamar's fantasy value there?
Yeah, I do. And I think it will this year too. And this is probably going to bite me in the ass this year for saying it right now. But I think that there are some players, very, very few players that like, and it's funny because this is the argument that I took against Saquon Barkley last year, that can transcend like the touch narrative and the age narrative. And I think Derrick Henry is kind of showing that he's one of those people, kind of like Adrian Peterson. There are other players that, you know, age and wear and tear just doesn't seem to apply to. I think everybody thought it was going to happen last year with Henry. I was one of those people, and it didn't. And I'm kind of in the I'm just kind of in the I don't think it's going to matter until like whatever. I'm going to ride it until it's not there anymore. And because of that, and because I think that he does eat into Lamar's rushing upside, I think it will affect it. It is a new offense or a new coach and stuff. So I mean, things could be different. But I don't think the new coaching staff was brought in to limit Lamar. So I don't think that matters. I really think it is just Henry that's going to eat into it. Yeah. But that being like, having said all that, I still don't think, again, like we talked about with Allen, I'm making it a point. Like I'm drafting like it could be right, because you could take Daniels and have the same potential. You could take May based on last year. You can argue the schedule if you want to and get the same potential. I don't see. I have the luxury of being #just a producer, of not having to do rankings. So really for me, it's just kind of like a mass of people. And when I'm in a draft, I'm going to see which one people don't like, and I'm going to take that guy because I view them all as the same potential. So I think Lamar has that range of potential. I do think Henry's going to eat into it, but I also don't think that like you need to make that call. Let the rest of your draft do it for you, and just kind of pick who's left and see if you can get some value.
I think it's a great point, and why I think that going into drafts with tiers in your rankings of knowing like, hey, I think these group of players are going to have very similar outcomes, and then I'm just going to kind of let that tier fall to me, and take the guy that everybody else may be a little bit more down on. I think that's a great point. As far as Derrick Henry goes, it doesn't concern me as much in terms of Lamar's fantasy value, just because like whenever I think about Derrick Henry, I think about the rushing touchdowns and the threat that he is at the goal line. And the Ravens, in which, I mean, like you said, new coaching staff, but previously the Ravens hadn't really ever used Lamar as a tush push type of weapon, or like, we're going to run him into the ground at the goal line. Like he's always had the rushing yards, but the rushing touchdowns hasn't really ever been a huge part anyway. And I mean, he had over 900 rushing yards in Derrick Henry's first year in Baltimore. And so I do think a lot of it really is just the injuries limiting him. And then, knowing that he was playing banged up, that even whenever he is on the field, not wanting him to run as much. Now, maybe the new coaching staff, they see their injury concerns and they want to try to limit his rushing a little bit more. But it's hard for me to see a coaching staff look at somebody as dynamic as Lamar Jackson and say, you know what, this particular skill that makes you really special, we don't want you to do that very much anymore.
Right.
I just, it's hard for me to see that being a route that a team goes. But I've been wrong before. I could certainly be wrong again. But the next quarterback that I want to talk about, and it's really interesting, we talk about these guys that are in this group here in the 5th and 6th rounds, and you have down here in the 6th round, at the very end of the 6th round, at the end of this tier, despite being the MVP runner-up and by the way, and despite being the QB3 in fantasy points per game last season, he's down here at, I believe it's QB7 in ADP right now. And so, Jim, I want to get, you're the resident Patriots fan. I kind of want to get your thoughts, pick your brain a little bit. What do you think about Drake May being the QB7 and being at the end of that quarterback tier right now? Because to me, it feels like he should be closer to the front of it.
Again, based on what I said, I don't care. I'll just take whoever's left in that tier.
Right.
So happy to have him there. But by comparison, I think it's really, I think, and honestly, I love narratives, but I don't know if I like that one. And I think it's based on that. I think the people are concerned that he had an easy schedule last year. Although arguably, wouldn't a stiffer schedule give him more opportunities? Not a stiffer defense necessarily, just playing against harder teams. Now, opportunities to do more. And I think that people look at the sustained production of the other players in that tier. They've seen it before. They've seen it for more than 1 year. So it's just easier to click on those people, and they're a little bit higher, to include Lamar. Even though Jaden Daniels, same amount of time in the league, but I think people are just more comfortable with that because they saw an awesome year from him as well.
Right.
But I don't see is it Burrow or Stafford that's higher? Because I can't see the ADP.
So right directly in front of him, you've got Jaden Daniels, like you mentioned, and then Joe Burrow, Caleb Williams, and Jalen Hurts. It's
Burrow that I don't understand. I don't. I get in a lot of arguments with this about Stacy, who I drafted a lot of teams with, who just had that show before us with the draft.
Yeah.
I don't understand the Burrow infatuation when it comes to comparing them to run QBs with rushing upside. First of all, I do believe in injury concerns.
Burrow has them.
People can see. You can't draft that way if you are drafting a bunch of teams. But again, talking about one league, I ain't taking that guy.
Right.
He's got a rushing upside, and he's been hurt for however many seasons out of the last however many seasons. So it's not that's not somebody I'm. So that to me is inexcusable. For the rest of it, I kind of get why people would take what they believe to be a proven commodity with the other players over Drake May.
And Nate, I want to come to you next because I know that whenever you look at Drake May, one of the things that concerns me is the level of efficiency that he reached last year. Like you're talking about first in yards per attempt, first in completion percentage over expectation, first in passer rating. Did you pull an efficiency metric out the hat? He was probably top 3 in all of them across the board. And I know that sounds more like an argument of why you should be in on Drake May versus why you should be out on Drake May. But, it concerns me a little bit that he might not be able to reach those efficiency levels. And then there is the whole strength of schedule argument. But to Jim's point, you can use that either way you want to, because if they're playing better teams, then that means those teams are ideally going to be putting up more points, which means the Patriots could be chasing more often, and maybe Drake May's passing attempts go up, and he has to do more to get the Patriots in contention in these games. But it seems like there's not too many concerns on your end because you do have him up as your QB2. So QB3 in points per game last year, so it seems like that you're seeing an ascension continue this year.
He's in that blend of quarterbacks that most likely I probably wouldn't necessarily reach to take just because we've talked about earlier, but what he does provide is first and foremost, he's the only quarterback last year with 4,000 yards passing and 400 yards rushing. So, he's starting off with obviously the pedigree of what we look for in a fantasy quarterback. The drawback to me, especially and I think in best ball, why we're seeing this is the lack of true high upside boom like QB1 overall finishes on a weekly basis, which you do definitely want in a best ball format. And he doesn't deliver on that, which is fine. If you're looking for consistent week to week production, which I think many people when they draft, they say, oh, I don't really want I don't want a quarterback that's going to be QB8 every single week and he's just going to play 18 games. And at the end of the year, you're going to say, oh, he was a QB2 because he played more, but he only had 3 weeks last year out of the entire fantasy season where he was outside of QB1. So you know what you're going to get. So when you do draft Drake May, the one thing you're going to get is you shouldn't have high variance in terms of production versus draft capital. The concern, of course, is what you just said, though, too, is that is a regression type metric across the board that he has, that if those things drop 5%, if his completion percentage drops 5%, as completion over expected drops, and all those things, what is the direct impact? Does that take him outside of the top, 6 or 7? Does that put him as a QB 10? If you have 4,000 yard passing and 400 yards rushing, regardless of the completion percentage, most of those were short to intermediate passes, and yet he still was a compiler with the added 400 yards rushing. So I'm pretty comfortable to think that if they expand the offense just a little bit more with familiarity, to achieve 4,400 again is almost a guaranteed slam dunk that he's going to be a top 6 option at the position, probably top 4 realistically with those two numbers, considering what I said earlier about the state of the quarterback position. You don't need as much to still be a top 2 or 3 option. And I don't love it. I'll be the first to admit, I never expected going into this last year that Drake May would be in my top 2, 3, 6 probably, but I'm peeling away the layers of the onion and I'm not crying. I'm kind of I am, because I'm not a big Patriots fan, but I'm a realist.
Yeah, I would be less concerned about the efficiency metrics falling off if the Patriots would have made a significant investment at the wide receiver position this offseason. And I know I didn't miss the news. I know that they brought Romeo Doubs in. I might be on an island with this one. To me, he's not a big needle mover. I think it's good for the Patriots offense overall. I think that he's a solid wide receiver too. But now, if something ends up happening and they end up trading for A.J. Brown, that's the type of needle mover where I'm like, all right, I can put Drake May up in QB2 now with something along those lines. But I am a little bit concerned about the drop there. But you talked about rushing. We talked a little bit about Jaden Daniels already, and he's next up. He's QB4 in our consensus rankings. Jorge, he said, I missed a week. Nate and Jim are back. I had to bring in the reinforcements since you weren't able to make it this week. But hey, if anything changes, feel free to jump in here at any point, obviously. And then Stacy, appreciate you joining us. Great job on the best ball stream earlier. All of them, really. You guys have been absolutely crushing it with the women's best ball tournament. It's been a blast to watch.
Stacy and Colby both just wrapped up a draft.
Yeah, great draft too. If you guys are watching right now with us and you didn't see the best ball draft that just finished up literally like 7 minutes before we went live, make sure you go back and check that out. And check out all the other ones. They've been pumping out best ball live streams over the last couple weeks. But so next man up is Jaden Daniels. He's the QB4 in our consensus rankings, QB3 for me. And honestly, it's whenever I was looking at this and I was starting to make this argument, I was like, man, I feel like I'm just talking about Lamar Jackson all over again, because it's really the same thing. It's, the injury risk is there. That's scary. But then you consider whenever he is healthy, just how good, just how special he is. As a rookie, over 3,500 passing yards, almost 900 rushing yards, 31 total TDs, a top 5 QB finish as a rookie, man. And last year sucked, obviously, with the injuries. And I guess if you want to if you want to be anti-Daniels, you can try to make the argument that it was a blimp on the radar type of thing in his rookie year, and he's not legit. I think he is legit. I think he's going to continue to get better, and I think a healthy Jaden Daniels, whenever you consider what he is as a passer, plus the insane rushing ceiling, I think he's a top 3 quarterback waiting to happen if he can stay healthy. And so if I end up taking a shot on one of these guys, it'll probably end up being Jaden Daniels ended up falling in a draft I'm in, and I just couldn't let him fall any further. Like he's a guy that's really, really easy for me to get excited about. But Jim, I want to throw this back to you. How do you feel about Jaden Daniels coming off the injury? I know you mentioned that that's something that you do factor in whenever you're making draft picks and you're trying to make choices in the middle of drafts. Are you worried about Jaden Daniels coming back this year off an injury, or what's your feelings going into the season with him?
Man, the way they treated his injury was kind of weird too at the end of the year.
Yeah.
I agree with where he's ranked. I don't think the injury is going to bother me as much with him, because he was playing, because he was still playing on it, right? Like I think he was sat down more because the season was over, because his injury was
right.
You know what I mean? What are you playing for? So I think he's appropriately drafted, appropriately ranked. Not a place again I'm looking to grab QBs, but I think that where all of you have him ranked, except Jorge, because Jorge has him ranked above Drake May, is fine.
I do too, but we don't have to talk about that.
I mean, like you said, the rushing ceiling being there in the 7 games he did play, when you average right at almost 9 rushing attempts a game, is it sustainable over the whole season? Probably not. But even if it's 7 attempts per game, that alone will support. I don't love the offense around him as much as what I was hoping they would do going in, but I don't hate it either. It's kind of one of those like, you know what? Maybe the lack of another wide receiver target outside of McLaurin maybe helps his rushing upside. Maybe that's not a bad thing if we want to look at play devil's advocate as into fantasy upside, if there's a way to phrase that positively. But I think we're all willing to kind of just ignore last year as a whole, is what it sounds like by us having him collectively at 4. We realize it's an anomaly season potentially, and we'll see what we get.
Yeah, last season basically never happened in my Brian. Just Men in Black, hit the button, completely forgot about it already. Next man up is Joe Burrow. We already touched on him a little bit. I know Jim, had it, and it's a very fair opinion of like, hey, you've got all these rushing quarterbacks at the top, and then you're going to insert Joe Burrow right here in the middle of them, and there is no rushing upside there. And Nate, I believe he was your QB5 as well, which is where right where he's at in our consensus rankings. So what are your feelings on Burrow going into this year? Do you comfortable having him above Jalen Hurts, despite the fact you're really not going to get anything from him on the ground?
Yeah, especially Jalen Hurts, just because I see all the reasons for Jalen Hurts that had supported the rushing element take a step back, while Joe Burrow does the one thing consistently is we know that the floor with health is as a QB1 just on the pure passing upside alone. He's got the weapons around him, of course. We know that. And if you could get 16 games, if there's a crystal ball that I could look into at the quarterback position, while it's very easy to say how many games will Jaden Daniels play? Yes, that gives me that. There's very few on this list that I think it would mean more for than if you told me give me 16, 17 games of Joe Burrow. And I think it's almost, I don't want to say guaranteed, but it has been. That's the thing. And last year, if you look at the way he ended it, I hate to use that ending as like a catalyst to this season, but he had 5 QB1 finishes out of the last 6 starts. And that's coming off of an injury that no one expected him to even be back. How many people dropped him and they were picked up off waivers. But yeah, it's not like everybody wants the rushing upside, but if you're going to have to take one, I think he's probably my lone target for the sub 100 yards rushing quarterback.
I just can't get there, man. I can't get there with Matt Stafford out there throwing to Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. I'm not even sure I can get there right now with Sam Darnold throwing to just JSN, but Rashid Shaheed too. I don't know if I can do it with Caleb Williams and his weapons, Dak Prescott and his weapons. I just don't like. I think he has the same potential as all of those players. I understand he's throwing to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I got it, but they also have a good running back too, and they started to use him more as the season went on. Like, and I know that Burrow wasn't on the field when they started to lean into the Chase Brown, like starting to run the ball more. So I know that happened a little bit more when Flacco came in, and Flacco did fine too in that offense. So I know what I'm saying. I just can't see paying that much for like Trevor Lawrence coming out of kind of nowhere. And I don't think Trevor Lawrence is going to do that again. Don't get me wrong. But I think there's plenty of quarterbacks that have really good weapons that on a points per game basis, it's not going to look that much better than, again, not to sound like a broken record, but the guys with the rushing upside that are going to put up 500-700 yards and just break leagues.
Here's the one difference between all those names that you just mentioned, which I think is a fair comparison to the weapons. The weapons they don't have, or the weapons they do have on the defensive side of the football are completely different. Cincinnati did make some moves this offseason. They've tried to increase their defense, but all of those players, they do all have defenses that are going to limit the potential for. I look at Joe Burrow and I look at the last really 3 fully healthy seasons, and we see 600 plus passing attempts in each one of those seasons. And I don't see a single quarterback of the ones that we're comparing him to that can get close to the 600 pass attempts, which that's what I would need for a non-rushing quarterback to be a stable asset. I also am not actively going to jump out and draft Joe Burrow in a ton of leagues myself either, because I too will wait for some of the other ones that we talked about later. But if he slips, or if I'm in a heavy draft with a lot of the rushing upside drafters, then maybe there's a value if he falls into that QB 7-8 spot. It probably won't happen though.
The defense is a really good point, or the lack thereof.
That's fair.
I agree. And I mean, like, whenever you're looking for the quarterback that doesn't offer the rushing upside, obviously the passing numbers need to be there. And that's the one thing that Joe Burrow has had. Like, so far, at least, of Burrow's career, you're getting one of two things. You're either getting a guy that's going to play 10 games or less, or he's going to play a full season and he's going to throw for 4,500 plus yards and 34 plus touchdowns, which he's done the 3 times he's played a full season. He's been over 4,500 yards. He's been over 34 touchdowns, and he's been the QB7, the QB4, and the QB3 in those 3 years that he's been healthy. And so I get both sides of the argument. It's why I typically don't have a bunch of Joe Burrow. But more important than Joe Burrow, we have Jorge Edwards joining us on the screen tonight. Boss man, appreciate you jumping on. What do you think about Joe Burrow and drafts this year before we move on?
You go back to 2024, the 600 plus passing attempts. The next highest quarterback was at 550. So to Nate's point, and to a certain degree Jim's point, the defense being what it is, they're going to have to be throwing the ball, and they're going to have to be catching up, or at least hanging in there against other offenses. As far as the discrepancy between Burrow and Jaden Daniels in ranking, so I believe I have Burrow ahead of Daniels, and so let me just make sure I'm not speaking. I have Burrow at 3 and Daniels at 4. So let's think about this. What gets Jaden Daniels hurt, right? Scrambling, running the ball. That's what kind of got him beat up. Remember last year versus Green Bay, there was one hit where the guy hit him in the knee, and he literally flipped over and fell down, and then it was a couple hits a couple weeks later versus the Seahawks on Sunday Night Football that knocked him out for most of the season. So, but that's a part of his game, right? That's what they use him for. That's part of his skill set. You look at Joe Burrow's injury history, if you want to throw that out there. Okay, he had a freak ligament tear in his thumb, that just happens, right? That's not something that is conducive to a pocket passing quarterback. You have not Achilles, but a plantar fasciitis or whatever it was last year. Again, that's not something that that's not associated with pocket passing quarterbacks, so to speak. So to Nate's point, when he returned, he had several top 10 finishes and fantasy points per game. So I think even if you took into account both of their injury histories, I would expect Burrow to bounce back faster than Jaden Daniels, given the weapons he does have on offense. And you look at what the Commanders did this free agency period. They tried to land so many offensive players, and all the reports on Twitter, it's like, they threw like $30 million at Alec Pierce, but he decided to go back to Indy. Oh, they threw so much money at this player, but they decided to go elsewhere. And, I truly believe that when Washington was like, okay, well, we're not going to get these offensive players. Let's get some defensive players and start to shore up some of the defense. That kind of maybe shifted their priorities in the draft, which is why you're starting to see all this, talk about, Jeremiah Love going to Washington if he slips to 7 this year. So having the fact that this could be a very conservative offense for the Commanders, again, conservative it's not really sexy for fantasy. You want the explosive plays, you want the weapons, and I think they're going to be in a situation where they just have to stay in games and play it conservatively versus having to rely on Jaden Daniels. And I know I'm harping at this, and I'll land the plane here, but the more they keep trying to keep up with other teams week in and week out, I think that, and they're going to utilize Daniels with his legs, that's going to put him more at risk, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you just listen to fantasy Twitter, once they trade for Brandon Ayuk and then they draft Jeremiah Love, the offense will be humming and ready to go. So all you have to do is just listen to the fantasy GMs on Twitter, and Washington will be ready to roll.
Honestly, I'd rather they get Juwan Jennings than Brandon Ayuk.
I like that. I like that call. I think Juwan Jennings would be a really nice compliment to Terry McLaurin. All right, next man up, and the last man kind of in this next tier of rank, at least our rankings. ADP would disagree. There was one other guy that we'll talk about at the top of the next segment that should be in this segment if you're going off ADP. Is Jalen Hurts. The offensive coordinator position is always a very scrutinized one for the Philadelphia Eagles, and they've got a new man in charge there. There's a new hope for the Philadelphia offense now that the Hitler version of the offensive coordinator they had last year is no longer there. Hurts had 8 rushing touchdowns last season, but it was his first full season as a starter that he didn't finish with double-digit rushing touchdowns. Was a quarterback 10 in points per game last season. But we know the tush push isn't going anywhere. The coaches and GMs have given up the fight. They have finally said, you know what, the tush push is here to stay. We're not going to fight it anymore, at least for now. And I will say Fantasy Meatball also brings up good reasons why you don't necessarily always have to invest in quarterbacks early with guys like Tyler Shuck and Cam Ward that could possibly be breakouts. And good evening to you as well. Appreciate you joining us. So Jalen Hurts, Nate, what are your thoughts in terms of, quarterback 10 and points per game last season? Assuming AJ Brown stays on the Eagles, do you see a bounce back this year? Do you think that that he'll be back in that quarterback 4, 5, 6 range, or do you think a back in QB1 is more of what we should expect from Hurts moving forward?
Yeah, the pro and con, weighing each quarterback's pros, cons, trying to determine how comfortable I am with reaching for a quarterback instead of waiting even further, because this is that range that I really just don't like that much at all. It feels like I would never be happy taking Jalen Hurts when I'm looking at some of the other options. But at the end of the day, he's been a QB1 in each of the last 5 seasons. So it's almost like it's far from guaranteed. But again, it's kind of like the rushing touchdown helps supports a lot of it. I think the impact of Saquon definitely decreases my love for a Jalen Hurts-led offense, or at least fantasy-led team. The offensive line has had some issues, and hopefully they get that rectified a little bit. I'm just kind of right in the middle. Like, I don't really have any – I don't see a recipe for, like, fantasy number 1 quarterback overall, and I just don't see him slipping outside of the QB 12, 13 range. And I know that's not a great analysis, but it's kind of a meh spot where – if it slips long enough and you just need to take a quarterback, I don't see a scenario that I ever will make a panic. Whenever you get sniped 2 or 3 times, whatever the situation is, and you have to revert to a position. Jalen Hurts is never the position that I will address in a onesie spot where I need a quarterback. I hated that I missed out on these 2 people. I'll take Jalen Hurts. You know what I mean? It's just that's not the target for me. And that's not it's not me hating on Jalen Hurts. It's just, it's where I'm at.
Yeah. No, I get that. I think Hurts feels like a guy that he might not be a league winner, but he's also not a guy that's going to wreck, that it's going to lose you your league either.
Right.
Which isn't the most exciting thing in the world, but it's at least a draft pick that isn't going to tank your season if you do end up investing in it. So I get why he's going where he's going. So our rankings, once we get out of the top 6, are kind of all over the place. But one thing that's been pretty consistent is that Caleb Williams seems to be the next man up. And whenever you look at the ADP that we were referencing earlier, according to Best Ball ADP, at least, we are apparently too low on Caleb Williams. And so I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. So if you look at this ADP real quick, you'll see that in the 6th round, you've got Jaden Daniels going off the 2nd pick of the 6th round. You got Joe Burrow a few picks later. And then actually before Jalen Hurts, before Drake May, 2 guys we've already talked about, there's Caleb Williams toward the middle of the 6th round right now. Jorge, are we getting a little too over our skis? Are we getting a little too excited about Caleb Williams for him to be that high up after one strong season? Or do you think it makes sense given year 2 in the Ben Johnson system and, just kind of where he's at this point in his career? Do you think that the ascension is going to continue?
I do. And the expression addition by subtraction. I really believe that this is going to be actually beneficial for Caleb Williams, the departure or trade rather to Buffalo of DJ Moore. We all remember DJ Moore catching that, bomb touchdown in overtime versus the Packers. Yeah. Recency bias is like, hey, that helped me get to a fantasy championship, so I'm not going to be hitting on that, right? But you look at what that offense was predicated on. It was running the ball. It was featuring Colston Loveland. We saw, glimpses of Luther Burden. Roma Dunze had some injury issues last year, but still a top 10 pick for the NFL. So you have the draft capital in there, and to your point, Ben Johnson's system. I think what you're going to see is, I think the Bears have the right players on the field to do what Ben Johnson wants to do, and so you have a lot of the Amon-Ra role with Burden, where you get a lot of yards after the catch, right? So that's going to add up in helping Caleb Williams' fantasy stats. You have the deep pass wide receiver in Roma Dunze. You have the balance on the offense with Monangai and Swift. And now you have Colston Loveland, who has a real possibility of being a top 5 tight end for fantasy. So again, just weapons galore. And they lost some key pieces on defense this year. So it's one of those things where that's gonna ultimately propel, I believe, Chicago to repeat as division champs again this year, and I only see that getting better for Caleb Williams for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, I like it. I haven't been able to get there with having him above Jalen Hurts yet, but I might end up getting there, honestly, even as we talk through things tonight. So next man up after Caleb Williams is
real quick though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just before, because I just wanted to, and just a thumbs up or thumbs down. What you guys think is, if you look at the negative, the cons of Caleb Williams last year is that the completion over expectation horrendous. He was 32nd amongst qualified quarterbacks in completion percentage. Do you think that is just reason to say we're too low on Caleb Williams because there's only room to grow in those second year under Ben Johnson? Or is that the predicator for I don't trust that he's going to be able to take that next step and all the things that just happen to go right are going to level off a little bit? And I think I'm on the pro side that is just the 1 year in a learning curve that he's going to continue to get. And it's only going to make him that much more of a safer pick. So is that kind of the consensus or not? Jorge, what were you saying?
So I was going to actually kind of segue that to Jim for a second, because Jim, you for years played in all these high stake tournaments and as a high stake drafter, to what Nate was just saying, what are your thoughts as far as like your level of confidence? As we are here right now talking about Caleb Williams, like, are you leaning towards the narrative like, yeah, he has a lot more upside coming his way, or does to Nate's point, where you're seeing some like deviations and underperformances, does that scare you off as a drafter?
I think I'm not as high on him as you all are. I'm with Drew still. I think I have Hurts above him. I didn't want to extend the Hurts conversation, but I looked this up while Nate was talking. First of all, I think Nate made the best point. You've got his first year in a Ben Johnson offense. I believe in Ben Johnson. And then what I wish, when Drew started talking about Caleb Williams, I was kind of like, I wish we could look at the first half of 2025 and the second half of 2025. And it looks like the completion percentage stayed about the same. But his interceptions went down a touch, not too much, but his touchdowns went up. He went to averaging 2 touchdowns a game from week 11 on. So I think you already saw a little bit of improvement from the end of 2025. And you now given a whole new offseason going into a season, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't continue to grow. I don't know if that quite justifies for me where he's going with his ADP or where you guys have him ranked, but I don't think it's that far off either.
He does feel like a very high risk, high reward player for sure. Because I mean, there is still the possibility of maybe he really just isn't that great. Like maybe he's just an okay passer, maybe instead of like maybe he's not a great passer. And and it is being an okay passer in that offense with those weapons good enough to pay off that ADP? I think is the question we're going to have to try to answer between now and draft season in August. So that I think Caleb Williams is going to be a very, very fun player to follow this offseason to see where his ADP goes and how that changes throughout the year. So after we get past Caleb Williams, the next man up in our consensus rankings is Justin Herbert. And with Herbert, we really haven't seen the fantasy ceiling since his sophomore year, whenever I think he was the quarterback 2 overall. And then since then, it's been a mix of, being a high-end QB2 or a low-end QB1. And he's right there in the middle of the QB1s now for this season. It's a tough one for me, because I don't really know what to expect from this offense. So, Jorge, I'll throw this one to you. I know that at least for those of us on the screen, because Aiden isn't here, I'd love to throw this to Aiden if he was here, because he's actually the highest of us on Justin Herbert and the one pushing his ranking up the highest. But what are your thoughts on Justin Herbert and just kind of the Chargers offense in general, in terms of, like, do you expect them to throw more this year, or what do you expect that offense to look like?
I expect it to look like the first couple of years with the Miami Dolphins, except with better quarterback play when Mike McDaniel is the head coach there. I fully expect. Lad McConkey had a little bit of a down year last year. I think that's compared to where he was going in drafts. You like the schematic additions, like I said, of Mike McDaniel, what that does for Amari and Hampton. They brought in Keaton Mitchell, although I'm still, for value, I'd rather have Kamani Vidal in later rounds than Keaton Mitchell. I need to double check where their ADPs are at. And you have, you have some weapons around around Justin Herbert. Now, the elephant in the room that we need to talk about is that we saw him use his legs a lot more last year, and part of me is thinking, all right, that reeks of Greg Roman. Well, Greg Roman's not there anymore, right? Mike McDaniel wasn't asking Tua to run the ball for
thank God,
for many reasons, although he still did, and we saw what happened, right? So at the same time, they do have players that maybe not sound sexy, like Quentin Johnston. I know that's not like a name that we can pay attention to, but when we saw last year, and Drew, I think on one of the episodes of Fourth and Frames, you brought it up regarding Quentin Johnston, is that during his rookie year, he was doing a lot of vertical routes where he wasn't having much success, but you saw the crossing routes increase more and more throughout the season. So you saw some more utilization, some different route tree combinations, And so you started to see glimpses of the versatility, and he had weeks where it kind of paid off for fantasy managers. And so I think the level of creativity with Mike McDaniel and his offense is going to be beneficial for Justin Herbert. The real question fantasy managers are going to have to ask is, will the lack of rushing that we're hypothesizing happening with Mike McDaniel be something that will drop him to the lower half of the top 12? That is a concern. But as far as like passing yardage and passing touchdowns, I'm not. I think there's going to be an increase in productivity there.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that Justin Herbert, at least as a passer, it still has a lot to offer, and is an extremely talented quarterback. I don't think the hype and the love that Herbert gets is unwarranted by any means. But it will be interesting to see what happens with his rushing totals. Somebody we don't really have to worry about what's going to happen with their rushing totals, because I think we know that's coming for this next player in our rankings is Jackson Dart. And I want to talk about him a little bit. I have him up at QB8. Jorge, you're actually the one keeping me from being the highest on Jackson Dart, because you have him up at QB7. And so you outdid me a little bit on Jackson Dart. I do think part of this, you need Jackson Dart to get better as a passer to hit his ceiling in year two. He was 29th in adjusted completion percentage. He was 20th in accurate throw percentage. He only averaged 160 passing yards a game, but hopefully getting Malik Neighbors back should help with that. And then hopefully the Isaiah Likely addition will help ease the pain with the Wan'Dale Robinson departure. But the crazy thing with Jackson Dart, and the reason why I think it makes sense to have him where we do, is that even with the poor passing numbers last year, he was still 5th in fantasy points per drop back, which was largely due to the rushing numbers. He was 3rd among quarterbacks in rushing yards per game. He was 4th in rushing attempts, and he had 9 rushing touchdowns as well. I think the rushing is here to stay. I don't think that there's really going to be anything that changes with that. Maybe the Giants do draft Jeremiah Love at 4 overall, and the rushing touchdowns take a hit, but I still think that Jackson Dart is going to scramble on a regular basis. I mean, it's one of the it's one of the things that makes him a threat in that offense. So I don't think that that's going to go away. I still think the rushing numbers are going to be there, that we love so much for fantasy purposes. And I think that he's one of the better values in fantasy drafts right now, because we have him, in our top 9 in our consensus rankings. But I think he's like quarterback 11 in ADP right now. Yeah. And so, not a bad value there. But a guy that doesn't run near as much, but still hasn't stopped him. Well, at least now, pre-injury used to run a little bit, but now after some of the injuries he's dealt with, not as much of a runner, but still a fantasy producer. And so, Nate, I want to talk to you a little bit about Dak Prescott. And it appears like we know CeeDee Lamb's going to be there. It appears George Pickens is back. I do think it's something to pay attention to, that Pickens, it has reported not to be thrilled to be playing under the franchise tag, and maybe he gets traded, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But what are your thoughts on Dak Prescott going into the season? You think he has another strong season under his belt after last year, whenever he was a top 10 guy in points per game? Once again, he was a QB7 in points per game. You think he has another strong fantasy season ahead of him this year?
Who are you talking to, Drew? You might
talking to you, Nate. Sorry.
Okay, that's why I was wondering about that. I'm a Dak Prescott drafter. He was my guy last year, and
which was a great call.
It was based off of the same thing I would go into this year, is that I fully expect with 17 games for him to hover and be right around that 600 pass attempt mark. I know the rushing upside is pretty much, non-existent, other than, like you said, dating back to 16, 17, and 18. But
right,
he's just kind of probably the boring late pick that I'm comfortable taking, because we know the weapons around him. We know the offense is going to be comfortable passing that many times, where at least I feel like it's not going to take a hit. We just talked about Justin Herbert, and that was one of the things that we had to constantly monitor with that offense is, are they going to, like we pointed out so many times over that span, where we're like, look at this, the passing attempts have risen by 22% over the last 3 weeks. and then it took a dip, and then we're like, oh, is this here to stay? That never happens in Dallas with Dak. We know that he's going to chuck the ball. The defense, again, if we go on that whole scenario, doesn't impress me too much. And I think that they're going to be in a position that Dak is just going to be that I think 4,000, 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns is nothing's given. But if I had to write something in the book, he would probably be the name that I'd write it next to with the second most confidence in the NFL, which is crazy to think that I'm that high on Dak Prescott's consistency.
Yeah, he's almost like the discount version of Joe Burrow. Like, he's going to be up there in pass attempts. The defense is going to put them in positions where they need to score, and he's got the weapons to throw the ball to. So it's almost like being able to draft Joe Burrow, but just a few rounds later. Gotta pause and take a moment, because Fantasy Meatball, man, you've already been extremely active in the chat, which we greatly appreciate the interaction and you being so active in the chat. But now throwing a $5 super chat our way, extremely generous, extremely gracious of you to do so. Who would be the best offensive player the Giants and Saints can draft to help Dart and Shuck continue to grow in their second year? Thank you, guys. So talking about the rookies coming in and where these guys are. So you've got the Giants at 4th overall, and then you've got the Saints at, what are they, 9th overall? Somebody fact check me on that if you can. I can't remember if they're picking 9th. I think they're picking right in front of Kansas City, if memory serves me correctly.
They are. They're 8th.
8th. Okay.
Yeah.
So we got the Giants at 4 and the Saints at 8. So I'll just start out. I think that Jeremiah Love is completely worth the hype. I'm usually team don't draft running back early, anything like that. But given the lack of top end talent in this draft and the way Giants at 5, correct? Sorry, and the way that Tennessee's at 4 is what I was thinking about, another possible Jeremiah Love destination. But I think it would make all the sense in the world to take Jeremiah Love right there at 5. As crazy as it might be to invest in a running back that early. If you don't go that route, I don't know if I'll see if you guys feel differently. I don't know if it makes sense to take any of the receivers that early. I don't know if you guys think a Cardinal Tate or Mekhi Lemon or Jordan Tyson is worth a pick that early. So we'll just take this around the frames. We'll, Nate, go over to you and then work our way around. Jorge, Jim, as far as the Saints and the Giants, what can these teams do to help their young quarterbacks?
Yeah, start with the Giants. If it's not Jeremiah Love, I don't see them. I think they'll address defense. I think that someone like Caleb Downs or someone that helped that secondary of the Giants would be most likely the best thing, which doesn't help doesn't help Jackson Dart at all. But with the Saints, they are in position there where they actually could take one of whoever you guys have. If it's Jordan Tyson, if it's Tate, I know some people are even pushing and saying that New Orleans should trade down to pick up a couple more spots and take someone like Mekhi Lemon. I'm fine with all of those. I think another big play, because Chris Olave is not toast. I really feel like we think that he's 32, 33 years old, and I don't know how old he really is. I'm pretty sure he's got a few years left in him of prime production, that I just feel like he's kind of been pushed to the wayside. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm biased. Jim?
And he's coming off a great year too. He's only 25 years old. He will turn 20. He will turn 26 in June. But still, right in the middle of his prime. The issue has just been staying on the field. But anytime Chris Olave's been on the field, he's been a very, very strong receiver. But to your point, I do still think they need somebody opposite Chris Olave, and I do think that they're more so in the range to make that investment in the first round than the Giants are.
For sure.
Jorge, do you disagree with any of that? What direction do you think that these teams should go to help their young quarterbacks?
I think they both should go wide receiver, to be honest with you. We have let's see who inspires confidence for the Giants here. Let's start with that. Malik Neighbors, assuming that he can play the entire year, which he has done his first 2 seasons in the league. Okay. Who you got him paired with? Well, you got Darius Slayton, old reliable, home run threat, nothing. You got Darnell Mooney, you got Calvin Austin. You bring in Isaiah Likely at tight end. Like, if Malik Neighbors goes down, this is another down year, right?
They're toast.
There's it's just not, the ceiling, so to speak, is just not going to be there for this team as a winning organization. Now, that being said, I fully expect Sonny Styles to be drafted here by the New York Giants at linebacker. So I don't see a situation here where they do that. But if they did do that for fantasy purposes, I would rather them take a wide receiver. And it's kind of similar to the Saints. I think they could also use another wide receiver opposite Chris Olave. Here's a, I guess, I don't know if you want to call it a hot take or not, but like, if they both drafted wide receivers and they both had 2 alpha wide receivers, if I had to predict which team was going to have more success in terms of win-losses, and then also which duo of wide receivers or offenses would create more fantasy points, I actually like the Saints better than the Giants, given what they have on the offensive side of the ball. I personally like Tyler Shuck a little bit more than Jackson Dart, so full disclosure there, to a certain degree. I still need to see more. Shuck had a good end of the season, but Dart is undeniable when he's healthy. Like, the rushing upside is going to be there. Passing upside might lean more towards Shuck.
And I think Meatball makes a great point that the Giants could get a receiver in the second round. I mean, they're picking 37 overall in the second round. So, I think like a Chris Brazel out of Tennessee or Elijah Surratt from Indiana. I think that those would be solid guys there in the second round. If this was a month ago, Amari Cooper Jr. I think would have been a great pick there. It sounds like now you're going to need to be back into the first round to be able to get him. But I think that's a great point too, that they pick earlier enough in the second round that I think that they could capitalize on receiver at that position there as well. Jim, any strong feelings on the Giants or Saints in terms of how they should approach this draft to try to see if either of these young quarterbacks are legit?
Yes. The gentleman asked about, offense, and it's a fantasy football show. So I think regardless of what we think the team should do, the answer is going to be geared towards our favorite offensive fantasy options. And that being said, the Saints just trained for a running back from the Jaguars. I just don't want to pronounce his name. And they already have Scadaboo, another name that's kind of a pain in the ass. So they're not going for a running back. I don't think any of the tight ends are going to come out NFL ready. I've been really wrong about that the last couple of years. But even Trey McBride struggled his rookie year. But I think that may have been more to do with that may have had more to do with Zach Ertz and his relationship with Cliff Kingsbury than actually Trey McBride's athleticism or ability to play ball. So all that being said, all that's left is wide receiver. I love Carnell Tate. I love every wide receiver that comes out of that school that doesn't play in a Shane Waldron offense. So I think that's – and all that being left is, the Saints take a wide receiver. For me, it's Lemon. You could argue Tyson too if you want to. I just like Lemon a little bit more. So agree with Jorge. It's 2 wide receivers. Take your pick out of the top 3. I think they're probably going to be interchangeable. That being said, it's Tate. Yeah.
I would not be mad at all about Tate to the Giants and then Lemon to the Saints. I think that would be a lot of fun, both for real life and for NFL purposes. So, Meatball, thanks again, man, for the $5 dono. Greatly appreciated. Jorge, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you are somebody who's able to get Jackson Dart, though, later on in your drafts, like, you are praying. You were praying. But you were praying they go defense and they address the defensive side of the ball for the first couple of rounds, because if that's the case, then this offense is going to be relying on him running the ball a lot more.
Underrated comment by Jorge was everybody's too high on Jackson Dart. Like, that was a weird offense last year. He was asked to do some things after they wanted to go with Russell Wilson. His path to playing and getting on the field was pretty unique. Yeah. And then his exit was pretty unpleasant, a lot earlier than everybody wanted. I don't think it's that. I'm not if he doesn't control the way that he plays ball, like that might be his story. And it's also tough. Like, I know we're past Dart, but real tough to put a lot of faith in a high pick for that. I get the upside, but I'm not sure we've seen enough. There's a new head coach. I don't. That's a tough ask for me, reaching that high to get him.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead, Roy.
I was going to say there is. So I don't think we saw the. Obviously, we didn't see the finished product of what he could be. Just obviously because one, he was a rookie. Two, injuries kind of like took out a couple games during his season. But he was thrown out there to save Brian Dable's job after the Dallas Cowboys game for Russell Wilson. So that was a desperation, throw in terms of, all right, Jackson, you're my guy. I went to bat for you. You're the reason why you're here. So let's go do this. And so I think there's going to be a little bit more of a scaling down effect as far as like what he's asked to do. But you can only do with what you got around you. And I don't think the Giants have enough around them to kind of take the ball out of his hands. And let's not forget, John Harbaugh coming up from Baltimore, he had no qualms about, at the time, a mobile quarterback run. And then over time, you saw Lamar Jackson's passing numbers and efficiency get better. So, it worked to make Baltimore a perennial playoff team. So, the precedent is certainly there.
Yeah, I do think there could also just be the reality where Jackson Dart might just end up being a better fantasy player than he is a real-life NFL quarterback. Like, I think he's one of those guys that can be loved in fantasy circles, but in terms of real-life NFL production, maybe he doesn't ever develop into that franchise quarterback level of passer that the Giants are looking for, and so it's tough sometimes to, as folks that are so entrenched in the fantasy world, sometimes it's tough to separate the two, but I do think that's at least in his range of outcomes. Now, Dart does need to learn to slide, but I think in a super flex dynasty, being able to flip a Chan to Dart and the 107, I think is a very strong move. And I think you did a great job there. So just to kind of wrap up our early quarterback rankings. And again, if you're looking for those, make sure to head over to fantasyandframes.com. You can find all of our rankings over there. I just want to throw you guys, there's two questions I want to cover around the frames real quick. And the first one is near and dear to Nate's heart, because I want to talk about Pat Mahomes. It wouldn't be a quarterback rankings episode without talking about Pat Mahomes. And this is the first year that you might actually be able to get him at a little bit of a discount, because we don't really know what's going on with the injury stuff. I know the reports are he's shooting for week 1. And I mean, every injured player this time of the year is shooting for week 1, and and it's all roses and everything until we get a little bit closer to the season. But and Nate, since you are the resident Chiefs fan, I'll start with you. Just right now in best ball ADP, he's the QB 12. But we already talked about best ball redraft is a lot different. Best ball drafters can grab him. They're going to grab another couple quarterbacks anyway, and they don't have to really worry about the risk. But as far as redraft goes, I got basically a 2-part question for you. Number one, what do you think about the whole injury recovery and everything like that, and where we're at with that? And then, because you are so tapped in with the Chiefs, and then number 2, how should redraft managers be approaching the whole Mahomes situation right now if he does end up in that QB 12, QB 14 range?
Yeah, so as far as the recovery goes, far from a medical professional, but it's always encouraging, this early on after an injury to see him doing what he's doing, which again, their videos, do they show lateral movement? No, but it does show good mobility, does show that he's planting, and all the positives that I would want to see at this point in the season is there. Do I think that he's eyeing for week 1? I don't know if I necessarily think week 1. I will say that there's been a lot of talk locally about they're very, very confident he doesn't start on the PUP, and that's probably the biggest news. Yep. Is because if he starts on the PUP, you're losing 25% of your season, and actually really closer to 30% of your fantasy season, and you wouldn't. Yep. And I can't trust in a top 12, 14 pick out of him. I do expect him not to play week 1. That would be my guess. If I had to pick 1 week, I think week 1's out. They have Justin Fields. It is what it is. The positives, as far as what you're doing for a redraft, is I don't want to overly encourage taking him with a lot of confidence. Let's be honest. First year back from injury, the offensive weapons are, who knows? We just don't know. Rashee Rice could be suspended at some point. Travis Kelce is obviously taking a step back. But there's one huge thing that I think shouldn't go unnoticed is Eric Bieniemy is back. And with Eric Bieniemy as the OC for that offense, I don't think that he is the guy, the savior for many teams. He hasn't shown that. But, man, his cohesion with Andy Reid and company, Patrick Mahomes has never not been a top fantasy option. And I think that there's just something with the way he's going to lead that offense. Hopefully it opens it up a little bit, but I'm putting, temper expectations a little bit on Mahomes as far as being a top 4, 5, 6 option. That's
I agree with you. The thing here that look, I don't know if everybody's missed this, but Kenneth Walker is now a Kansas City Chief, right? And we go back to Patrick Mahomes.
Breaking news.
Last year. Yeah, I know, breaking.
Boom, shakalaka.
I should have that queued up. Mahomes is the QB4, averaging 20.4 points per game. But you know what else he was? He was the QB5 in rushing yards with 422 rushing yards. And we saw him, having to make plays. And now you have Kenneth Walker there. Okay, well, you expect those rushing numbers to come down, especially coming off the injury, especially with the Chiefs wanting to protect their franchise player there. So I'm thinking last year was just an anomaly that they just had to generate some creativity and some plays, and the running game wasn't there. And then you saw Patrick Mahomes kind of take off and do his thing. I think with the addition of Kenneth Walker this year is going to be one of those reset buttons. There's okay, all right, let's let a running back run the ball, not have our pocket passing quarterback risk re-injuring himself this year.
Jim, I know you mentioned pre-show that you had some thoughts on the whole Mahomes situation. So hit me with it. What's your take on how we should be managing this and approaching this situation in drafts right now?
You ready for Cole Kmet 2.0?
Absolutely. My body is ready.
Jorge knows already. It's Justin Fields.
He calls me on the way home from work. He's like, by the way, I just want to say you all are dead wrong in your show last week. Justin Fields is a must guy. And I'm like,
really?
Okay. I'm waiting with bated breath to hear what Jim has to say right now.
It's March, so taking into account the valid points that Nate just made. If this dude starts, if Patrick Mahomes starts week 1, then whatever, I'm wrong. But if he doesn't, if he starts on the pup, or if he comes out and he's going to miss the first 3-4 weeks of the season, and this is why I'm legitimately excited to talk about this. You're going to get Justin Fields, who just played for the Jets, who just averaged, make sure I get this number right, according to fantasy points, 16.3 points per game with the Jets in an Eric Bieniemy offense. Right? That's what we just talked about, the relationship with the team, with rushing upside. And I know they just got Ken Walker, but he can dump to Ken Walker just as well as Pat Mahomes can. I just think that whatever he plays, if you don't want to reach up for Joe Burrow as the number 5 overall pick, you're going to get a guy that can start the season. And I firmly believe will be a top 6 QB as many games as he plays. If Pat Mahomes plays, I actually don't think I want him for probably about 8 weeks, which means I'm not going to get him because you're not going to pay that. You know what I mean? It's too expensive for a guy that you're not going to start in week 1. And if you're good, and if a guy to sit on your bench, I will say in best ball, if you're going to take Mahomes, you have to take Fields, but then you're wasting a QB spot. The whole strategy goes into it. But if Mahomes starts the season on week 1, I'm just not into a guy at that price, especially as we get closer and we get news, I bet you his price drops if he's not going to play. He'll drop down to 16, 18, whatever it is. But here in March at that price, no way am I going to take it on a guy that I don't believe is going to start week 1 or 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah.
But I will take Justin Fields at whatever. I had looked up his ADP the other day when I called Jorge, but I forget what it was. But I'll take him at that price all day because I think he can put up Mahomes numbers. And let's not forget too that Mahomes, like Jorge talked about the lack of a rushing game. I think was it. There wasn't a passing game either, right? It was deep balls to Tyler Thornton that was saving a lot of those games or a lot of the Mahomes fantasy value to start the season. It wasn't Xavier Worthy. Rice wasn't playing. Kelsey was a shell of himself. I think he'll be better. I kind of like Kelsey at his price too. Another show, another day. But I think Fields in that offense is not going to be Fields on the Jets. And if he's getting that work that Mahomes should be getting, why rush Mahomes back? If you're winning games with Fields, take your time, man, and get ready. Let's save you, keep you healthy for the playoffs. Are you going to get a full season out of Fields? Probably not. But I think if everybody's happy with it, eventually somebody that paid that price is going to be happy that they got Mahomes, but they're going to be out of the playoffs by then. Season's going to be over.
I do understand that the most recent version of Justin Fields we saw was on the Jets. And so I know that needs to be taken with a grain of salt. I'm not sure how confident I am the Chiefs can win games with Justin Fields at quarterback. And I also probably just have some Justin Fields, admittedly, I probably have some Justin Fields fatigue because I have been a Fields believer basically since he got drafted and have just continued to get burnt year after year after year. And I keep coming back for more every year. It's like the Kyle Pitts experience I've been riding, but even more painful and even more and burning me even harder. And so maybe I'm just a scorned lover at this point, but as far as redraft, and this is very team specific, but if your redraft league has IR spots in it, I have if Mahomes is going at QB 12, QB 13, QB 14, I have no issues with you taking Mahomes at his draft price, drafting another quarterback, even if it is Justin Fields or Malik Willis or some of these other quarterbacks we're going to talk about here in our last segment before we close things out. I have no issue with taking Mahomes at his price, stashing him on IR after your draft is over, and then just hitting the waiver wire and just streaming the position until Mahomes comes back. I have no problem with that if your league has an IR spot. If your league doesn't have an IR spot, I don't want to burn a bench spot. If you're talking about 4 or 5 bench spots in your redraft league, I really don't want to burn a bench spot to hold a second quarterback. So it is very specific to how your league is set up. But I get what you're saying. And Justin Fields, the fantasy quarterback, will always have appeal because he can run the shit out of the ball. And the Chiefs offense is very fantasy friendly. And you don't have to really worry about the lack of weapons as much with Justin Fields because you're less dependent on what he's going to do as a passer and you're more dependent on what he's going to do as a runner anyway. And so you're not really as concerned with, does Rashee Rice get suspended or is Travis Kelce, the same or whatever. That stuff doesn't matter as much with Justin Fields because he's just going to run the shit out of the ball anyway. And that's all we care about for fantasy. So I do get the argument, but man, Meatball hit it on the head. Just draft Kyler Murray later. I love that. Love it.
Unless you make me shut up about it, I'm going to keep going for a minute.
Keep going, please.
Okay. So I get that you can get Kyler Murray later, but if you're playing in a 12-team league where a lot of people take 2 QBs, you can literally wait till the end of your. You might miss on Murray. You might miss on those people that are taking 2. I don't know if you wait that long. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes I have, but you can still you can get him to and then you can pick up a Darnold. Last year you could have picked up a Stafford. I'm literally putting him out there as somebody that you can take a shot on that I think is going to start the year and give you top 6 production. And why wouldn't you want that in any format, regardless of you start? Now we're talking about the same as May or Hurts or Caleb Williams, and you can get this dude at the end of drafts and then figure out who else you want from the other 60 QBs that are going to start the year and are usable. Jacoby Brissett. Or again, I'm not going to say Stafford again would be cheating, but Jacoby Brissett, Malik Willis from Green Bay last year, people that can still put those numbers up. I will say one more thing about it, and then I'll set up about Justin Fields, although not for the year, just for the show. 9 games played, 8th in rushing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's And to your point, right? I mean, granted, if we get closer to draft season, we know Mahomes is going to be out. I'm sure the ADP will go up. But right now, Justin Fields is completely free. Like he's going in the 19th round after Aaron Rodgers and Michael Penix. Aaron Rodgers doesn't even have a team right now, and Michael Penix might not even be the starting quarterback on his team. And so
Command 2.0. It doesn't cost you anything if I'm wrong.
Doesn't cost you anything, and I do think that is the best argument. Is it costs nothing to find out what Justin Fields could be, and I think that's fair. All right, last question before we get out of here. I'm going to pull up our consensus rankings one last time, just as a reminder for those of you still with us. If you want to see all of our quarterback rankings, we're going to be releasing all of our positional rankings for redraft week by week as we go through these rankings episodes. Right now, you can find the quarterback rankings live at fantasyandframes.com/redraft-rankings. You guys might not be able to see this on the small StreamYard screen. The viewers that are watching this full screen will be able to see it a little bit better. But that's a screenshot of our rankings for the guys outside of the top 10, the guys we haven't talked about right now. Who are the upside swings that you want to take a little bit later? So guys going outside of the top 10, but they might have like borderline top 5 upside. And so, I feel like whenever you're in one quarterback leagues and you're playing the late round quarterback game that we're talking about that we want to play, at the end of the day, that's what you're shooting for. You're going into it with the mindset of, if I have to stream it on a week by week basis based on matchup, that's what I'm going to do. But we're all trying to identify those guys in the draft that could turn into the next Drake May or Jaden Daniels in his rookie year, or those guys that you're drafting late, but you hit on them and then you don't have to stream the position because they end up being a top 5, top 6, 7 guy for the rest of the season. So out of the guys we haven't talked about yet, the guys down here in the quarterback 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 range. Let's go around the frames and we'll start with Nate and just work our way down. Who's a guy that you think could possibly have some top 5 upside outside the top 10 this year?
It was just in the chat. It was Kyler Murray. It makes, I mean, any pair me any quarterback in KOC offense, and I think there's a pathway to success. We've said the name Sam Darnold a few times, which obviously I think under Kevin O'Connell, and obviously he replicated it in Seattle as well. But I think that was a very good reinsertion of faith and trust and belief because of a system that Sam could carry along. Kirk Cousins had some of his best careers in 2022. Hell, if you even look back at, was it 2023? I mean, Nick Mullins in 5 games put up almost 1,400 yards and 7 touchdowns in 5 games. So, I think that, assuming that he starts, I don't see any path that JJ McCarthy actually earns that role there, and it just seems too easy that something's bound to go awry.
Could be, but I love the target though. Jorge, how about you? Do you got you in on Kyler as well, or do you have a different target?
No, I mean I like the Kyler call. Somebody that I would be, to be honest with you, pretty excited to take in the later rounds, and I mentioned him earlier, but that's Tyler Shuck for New Orleans. Like, the passing volume to finish down the stretch was very solid. We saw him have a bunch of top 12 fantasy point finishes. How good are the Saints really going to be on defense? So therefore, that offense is going to have to keep them in game. So I think it's going to be very fantasy friendly. And to the point that we were mentioning earlier from Meatball's question, as far as like if they are able to get another playmaking wide receiver, well, that's just even better news for Tyler Shuck there. So I'm definitely excited to see what he has around him heading into the season.
Jim, how about you?
I would have said Murray, but actually I would have said Fields, and then I would have said Murray. But I wanted to look up what Meatball said real quick. Purdy's weapons of this day, top 5.
Yep.
I actually thought Purdy's touchdown total would have been higher than what it was last year. I think he can easily get over 20 again, and that's enough to just move him up a considerable amount. I will say, but I just wanted to call out what he said. I'm actually kind of No, it won't be top 12, so I won't say. I was going to say I'd like to see what Mendoza does in that Kubiak offense, just because of what Kubiak does for offenses. But I'll wait till after the draft. So I'm going to agree with Meatball and say Purdy is probably the best one that can probably move up into that top 12.
Yeah. So pre-show, Purdy was, as much as it pains me to say, because I hate the damn 49ers, Purdy was the guy that I picked out as well. He only played 8 games last year, but the 8 games he played last year, he was the quarterback 2 in points per game. He was the quarterback 9 in points per game in 2024. And then his first full season as a starter in 2023, he was the quarterback 8. So we're talking about 3 straight years as a top 9 quarterback in fantasy points per game. Probably be without George Kittle, but, added Mike Evans at least. So that should definitely help with the receiving, with the passing touchdown numbers. And then Christian McCaffrey wasn't necessarily himself as a runner last year, but was still just as much of a pass game weapon as he's ever been. And I don't expect that to change either. So I love the Purdy call. I think he's a great value right now. Just throw out a different name. I do think Bo Nix, with his rushing ability and the fact they just added Jalen Waddle, I do think he's also another interesting target that even myself, right now I have Bo Nix as QB 14. That might be a little bit too low. I think he'll probably be a guy that I'll end up, even though I'm not the biggest Bo Nix fan in real life quarterback, again, real life and fantasy separating the two. I do think I might be a little bit too low on Bo Nix, just to throw a different name out there. But I like the Purdy call, and that's where I was leaning as well.
See, why take Josh Allen? Why take Josh Allen so early when you can get all these dudes that you think are going to be 10 points above, or 10 spots above ADP in draft position of points?
I don't have a good answer for that, which is why I'm going to continue to draft quarterbacks late. I completely agree with you. So that is a wrap on our early look at our top 12 quarterback rankings. We will continue to update these throughout the offseason. Obviously, the NFL draft is going to affect things. Training camp is going to affect things. Unfortunately, injuries are going to eventually happen, and those will affect things, and we will continue to update these. And then later on this summer, closer to draft season, we'll take an even deeper dive into our rankings and where we finish closer to the NFL draft or closer to fantasy drafts. But round the frames real quick. Nate, let the folks know where they can find you, what you got going on this offseason, what you got planned for the rest of the offseason for our listeners and viewers.
Well, it's at Nate Markham 11 now. If anybody wants to go throw any hate mail to the other Nate Markham account, feel free to do so. Death threats are warranted. I will recoup any legal fees accrued. I will not actually do that. And yeah, Wednesday nights, man. We will be doing this.
Wednesday nights.
We got 24 running backs to talk about next week. It might be a Wednesday night, Thursday morning. So
that won't be much more of a brief overview. I can promise you that.
No,
Boss man, Jorge.
So there was no Dynasty 365 and Shoot the Gap tonight, but we will be doing double duty next week for Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and then 9 p.m. making up the episodes for tonight. Then, of course, we'll be back on 365 and Shoot the Gap, and then, of course, here on Fourth and Frames on Fantasy and Frames Wednesday. We got articles coming out this week, Dynasty values on all the positions on offense and for IDP. To Drew's point, make sure to head over and check out our rankings, our Dynasty rankings. We have our rookie rankings that are still being updated as we get closer to the NFL draft. We now have the ability to put out IDP rookie rankings. I talked to the people over at Fantasy Pros. I'm like, you need to make this tool. And I've been talking to their director of content for about a month and a half, and they finally, the developers, make it. And he let me know today. And so that's really exciting, because the only place that you could previously have checked out Dynasty rookie rankings for IDP was DLF. Well, now you can find it here at fantasyandframes.com. And aside from that, we have the Fantasy and Frames women's basketball tournament drafts going on. I believe there's one more next Monday. The Cynthia Freeland division, Cynthia Freeland from NFL Network. So in honor of her and all the work she's done in the fantasy space. So definitely looking forward. Definitely got a lot of things going on here at Fantasy and Frames.
Absolutely. And then hashtag more than just a producer, Jim. I don't care what you try to say. We know the truth here. Anything you got going, anything you want to promote before we get out of here?
Yes. I was going to promote a lot of the stuff that Jorge just said because that's what I work on too. But if you notice, I'm wearing a Panthers hat tonight. I'm coaching my first game. Well, I'm not. I'm assistant coaching my first game on Friday night. My son and my daughter are on the team. So any good vibes you all have, throw them my way. Friday, 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. I need it. I'm nervous as fuck. So you guys got throw it out to the West Coast. Also, go Panthers. That's uncomfortable.
Go Panthers, indeed. That makes me think about Friday Night Lights. Hopefully you guys have a season even better than they did. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. It is a coaching your kids is a nerve-wracking experience, but man, it is a lot of fun though. It is a lot of fun. I'm excited for you. I'm at Drew 3MR. I haven't been hacked yet, but I don't have two-factor authentication set up, so I'm not ruling it out completely. So I might join Nate and have a new Twitter handle by the next time you see me. Who knows? But outside of that, just make sure to be tuned in here at Fantasy and Frames. For those of you guys that are still with us, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Whenever you do subscribe, there's going to be a little bell that pops up. You're going to want to make that little bell go ding, click on that bell, and then you will be notified anytime a new live stream starts, anytime a new video is uploaded, anything like that. You guys will get notified of that. So we appreciate all the support. Special shout out again, Fantasy Meatball. Appreciate the just all the normal engagement tonight. Very active in chat, but then the generous $5 super chat as well. Appreciate all you guys hanging out with us tonight, talking redraft rankings at quarterback. You got to be a real sicko to want to hang out and talk redraft quarterback rankings at the end of March, whenever drafts aren't for another several months. So appreciate you guys hanging out. We'll be back next week to do it all over again, like Nate mentioned, on the running back side of things. We're going to be talking about top 24 running back rankings, just a more high-level thing. We'll break them down, top 12 and then 11 and then 13 through 24 later on in the season, but just kind of a high-level overview of the running back position next week. So make sure you guys come back for that. Other than that, that's all for us tonight on Fourth and Frames. Appreciate all of you guys for being here. Appreciate these gentlemen on the screen for all of the analysis, and we will see you guys next week.